Follow along, Catholic Pilgrims, as we follow French Doctor of the Church, St. Francis de Sales, through his book, Introduction to the Devout Life. Tune in as we read through this practical guide for living out the Catholic faith well. Hello, Catholic Pilgrims, and welcome back to another great day. When I was Protestant, growing in holiness was never really something that was talked about. Just being a believer made you righteous in the eyes of God, so that was really all there was to it. I didn't grow up learning about how suffering can be redemptive or how we can sacrifice to show our love. Jesus' sacrifice was all that was focused on, which is absolutely good and important, but what happens when major suffering comes our way, or when we are asked to sacrifice in a big way? Or when God permits you to be tempted in difficult ways, like St. Catherine of Siena, who we heard about in our last reading. For me, when suffering came my way, I bailed because I thought God would protect believers from any suffering or difficulty, when in fact, it's usually the opposite. If you are going to be made into a saint, well, you don't get there by taking the easy path. Saints are forged in trials, temptations, and suffering. St. Francis is going to give us some encouragement if we are facing temptations, so let's open our books to chapter 5 of the fourth part. Chapter 5, Encouragement for the Tempted Soul. These grievous assaults and powerful temptations are never permitted by God save to those whom he purposes to exalt in his pure and excellent love. Nevertheless, they are not on this account certain to attain thereto, for sometimes those who have bravely withstood such violent attacks do not continue faithful to the divine goodness, but are overcome by little temptations. Therefore, should you ever be afflicted by grievous temptations, be sure that God grants you a special favor, by which he intimates that he would raise you up before his face. But still be very humble and fearful, not feeling confident that you can overcome trifling temptations because you have overcome greater, except by continual faithfulness to him. Whatever temptations then assault you, and whatever attraction ensues, so long as your will refuses consent to either, be not afraid. God is not displeased. When a man has swooned and gives no sign of life, we place our hand upon his heart, and if we find the slightest action there, we decide that he lives, and by the help of some cordial or stimulant, he may be restored to consciousness. Thus, sometimes through violent temptations, our soul seems to have lost all her strength, and as in a swoon, to be without spiritual life or motion. But if we would know the truth, we must feel the heart. If the heart and will retain their spiritual action, that is to say, if they persevere in refusing to consent and follow temptation and attraction, the spirit of resistance abides in our heart, and we may be certain that charity, the life of the soul, is yet in us, and that Jesus Christ our Savior is there, although silently and hidden, so that by continual prayer, participation in the sacraments, and trust in God, we shall regain our strength and enjoy a vigorous and blessed life. In high school, I was a track runner. Well, that is until I severely injured myself, but anyway, I was a sprinter, and my main race was the 400-meter dash. As most people know, before the season starts, athletes train and practice to condition and learn their sport. In track, usually the sprinters are separated from the long-distance runners because our races are just different. You can't train for a 100-meter dash like you would train for the 2-mile race. So because I was a sprinter, I was grouped in with the other sprinters. However, my coach, Coach Heck, singled me out even more. While all the other sprinters were doing typical sprint training work, he would make me go run the hilly backcountry roads of my hometown. And he'd follow along in his truck, spitting out sunflower seeds and heckling me as he drove along beside me. "Come on, Amy Sue." My name is actually Amy Ann. "Come on, Amy Sue. You can run harder than that." I had to run more hills, do more box jumps, do more of everything than the other sprinters. And I thought for sure my coach hated me. I'd come back from a workout just wiped out, while the other sprinters had had a pretty light day. I'd be exhausted and ravenous, and the other sprinters seemed full of energy. So I did all this extra training. I suffered on those hills, and I felt very alone a lot of the time. I just could not understand why my coach treated me this way, and I couldn't understand how the head coach permitted it. Didn't he see I was basically being punished? Well, to make a long story short, at one meet during my freshman year, my coach told me that the state champ in the 400 the previous year was going to be at the meet. Now, she was a lot bigger than me. I think she was a junior, and I was just a freshman. That day, though, I stepped out on the track, and I blew away all the competition. I set a PR and a school record that day. My coach afterwards came over to me as I was huffing and puffing with my hands on my knees. He smiled and he said, "That's what I was trying to get out of you, Amy Sue. I knew you had it in you." It was in that moment that I realized that my coach had basically tortured me to refine me as a runner. He had seen something in me that he didn't see in the other sprinters, and he knew the only way to draw out my talent was to push me to what seemed beyond my limits. But it wasn't because he hated me. It was because he knew what I was capable of. St. Francis says, quote, "These grievous assaults and powerful temptations are never permitted by God, save to those whom he purposes to exalt in his pure and excellent love." Unquote. He continues, quote, "Therefore, should you ever be afflicted by grievous temptations, be sure that God grants you a special favor by which he intimates that he would raise you up before his face." Unquote. It is a paradox of life that we can only be strengthened and made great through trials and sufferings. If God is permitting you to be tempted, even tempted greatly, it is because he is burning off weakness to help you become who he created you to be. To become a saint, to become holy, you have to practice the virtues. And how we practice them is by being confronted with situations that require us to put them into use. Just like my coach knew I was capable of more, God allows difficulties in our lives because he can see that we are capable of more, of holiness. He will give us the grace to sustain us through the trials and difficulties, so we will never go it alone. After that track meet where I won, I was grateful to my coach for the opportunity to see just what I could accomplish. And we should be grateful to God too for being given the opportunity to grow in holiness. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you back here soon. Until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.